I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 160, House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, of course known as the Mighty Ogo, truly the only committee that matters. Before we start, everyone, please, just a reminder, keep your headphones away from your mics at all times, and do not touch the microphone either, please, to protect the hearing of our very valued interpreters. Before we start, we have Minister Duclos, welcome back, of course, but we have him only for 1 hour. I know we're always quite loose with our times, but I'm going to keep everyone exactly to their allotted time. So to prevent me from cutting you off or missing an answer, please watch your own clock. We'll now turn things over to Minister Duclos for 5 minutes for an opening statement. Welcome back, Minister, and your officials. The floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci de votre...
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the warm welcome on this beautiful Thursday morning. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to discuss the supplementary estimates for Public Service and Procurement Canada, as well as for Shared Services Canada for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. Please allow me to acknowledge that we gathered here on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe people and Algonquin people. Joined here by colleagues, the Deputy Minister Ariane Areza, Alex Béné, Associate Deputy Minister, Simon Page, Assistant Deputy Minister, Catherine Poulin, Assistant Deputy Minister, Marc Poulin, as well as Michael Hammond, Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Financial Officer. And from Shared Services Canada, we have the President, Scott Jones, as well as Scott Davis, who is Assistant Deputy Minister and Chief Financial Officer. Mr. Chair, in the supplementary estimates, we're asking $841.7 billion, as well as another amount for Shared Services Canada. Before I go into the details, please allow me discuss some of my priorities as well as those of my team and the progress that we've been able to make since my last appearance before this committee. First, government's plan to address the housing crisis by building 4 million extra housing, which is the most ambitious construction plan in Canada, and we are fast-tracking things. PSPC is doing its best in order to make sure that this is going forward, and we launched an initiative which includes 83 federal units, which will add to these construction units, and we will increase that number over the next months as we continue to assess the availability of public lands, excess public lands. As far as is possible, our government is reconverting its properties into affordable housing, not through unique sales, but spreading out the payments in order to make it more affordable and ensure that public lands remain public. In the meantime, Mr. Chair, we recently had a milestone in order to make dental care services more affordable for admissible and eligible Canadians. And to date, over 1 million Canadians have been able to receive dental care as part of this plan, and over 3 million Canadians have been able to secure a membership card, and participation will continue to increase next year as more and more Canadians aged 18 to 64 will become more eligible under this plan. Since then, Mr. Chair, basing ourselves on recent reports and including those of this committee, the Canadian government has provided a certain number of improvements, significant improvements, in order to protect the federal procurement system. We've intensified our systems in order to detect fraud and counter certain unorthodox practices by some suppliers and public servants. PSPC staff continues to work with other government departments on surveillance measures, especially when it has to documenting the requirements as well as decision-making when it comes to procurement and professional services. I would equally mention that PSPC is progressively putting in place a management system to gauge the performance of suppliers in order to continue checking costs and ensuring that this is aligned with quality and the calendar. And as soon as this program will be put in place, there will be a grading system that will be used in future for future submissions. Mr. Chair, in order to come back to the supplementary estimates for PSPC, most of the funds we're asking, which is $620 million, will help fund the implementation of certain essential infrastructure projects. PSPC is asking $102 million in order to put in place a new human resources and pay services, and $9.6 million for the Translation Bureau in order to ensure that both official languages, English and French, remain vital here in Parliament. I'd like to quickly move on to the supplementary estimates for Shared Services Canada, which as the pillar of technology for the Canadian government provides programs and services of a technological nature which Canadians so direly need. We ask for 52 extra million in order to move the budget from $62 million and an additional amount of $2.5 million for telecommunication infrastructure in view of the important G7 summit in Canada in 2025. Mr. Chair, this work only represents some of the important initiatives underway in my portfolio at PSPC, and I would be glad to address your questions and comments.
With Mrs. Block for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to you, Minister, and to your departmental officials for joining us here today. After 9 years of this Liberal government, everything is broken, and you don't need to take my word for it. And I'm going to note that it's especially the procurement system within the Government of Canada. This is not a partisan statement, but a sentiment that is also shared by the Procurement Ombudsman. In an article from Blacklock's reporter titled $25 billion Contract System Broken, the Procurement Ombuds said that the Canadian system is kind of near the bottom tier, and that's a quote. He went on to say that the irregularities, such as the sweetheart deals, are symptomatic of a broken system. And on Tuesday, when he appeared before committee, he gave us some examples, such as, and it was quite a list, such as We Charity, ArriveCan, McKinsey, Bait and Switch, and now Indigenous procurement. And as you said in your opening comments, Minister Duclos, Public Services and Procurement Canada works with all departments when it comes to procurement. So billions of dollars are being wasted and going to Liberal insiders who are basically fleecing taxpayers. How much money are taxpayers on the hook for outsourcing this year? Can you provide us with a number?
Well, I'm very glad that we're talking about procurement this morning, because procurement in the federal government represents approximately 400,000 contracts and other activities that, in fact, just dating back 2 years ago, have saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of Canadians because of the immense ability to save, the issue that we were obviously facing in hospitals and across Canada, vaccines and PPEs and other things, and pointing to the successes and the challenges, which you're correctly pointing to, that we're having with the national shipbuilding strategy, defense procurement.
Excuse me, Minister, I didn't point anything out about the national shipbuilding strategy. I asked how many contracts are being outsourced and how much are Canadians paying for those contracts to external consultants.
And I'll come back to that in a moment.
I would actually like you to just provide me with the answer now.
Well, we have, I'll come back to what I thought would be my first point. I'll come back to that a second. But on external services procurement, as you will know, we have significantly reduced those dollars, because we don't need those investments so much as we did need them during COVID, where the lives and the safety of Canadians were extremely important to the federal government.
By how much have you decreased the amount of funding being spent on external contractors?
So by approximately 15%, because that's the right thing to do.
15%. What is the dollar amount?
I know translation may have a difficulty if we interact too often together. It will be difficult for French-speaking MPs and others listening in the room and outside to follow.
I'm going to interrupt here, and I've stopped your clock. This has come up before repeatedly. If there's issues with interpreters, they will advise the clerk, and the clerk and I will intervene. Until then, we'll get back, but we appreciate if you could respond to the question. Thank you.
So should I? So as I mentioned, it's about 15%.
An amount in dollars, please.
Well, it depends on departments because we don't control all contracts, but each department has had the objective overall of decreasing reliance on external consultants by about 15%.
So in other words, you don't know the number. We know that the government has blown past its deficit targets. How much of that is due to the increase in outsourcing?
Well, that's a great point that you're making because we are seeing in Canada a fall in inflation, a fall in interest rates, just announced just a few days ago, the fifth in a row, which is the fastest fall in interest rates seen across all comparable developed economies. We're also seeing an increase in employment.
Minister, I know we've had this kind of an exchange in previous committees, and I can appreciate that you really don't want to answer the questions that we're asking here today. But you're really doing us as parliamentarians and Canadians a disservice when you ignore the questions that we're asking on behalf of Canadians. And so I would simply put to you, your government is blowing past its deficit targets. How much of that is due to an increase in outsourcing?
Well, what I'm trying to do respectfully is to support the initial part of your question, which started by saying that everything is broken in Canada, which is inaccurate and I think insulting to most Canadians because, as I said, we are doing really, really good compared to most other countries in the world. Yes, we've had challenges post-pandemic.
In other words, you would say that Canadians have never had it so good. Is that what you're saying?
Canadians don't want to hear that everything is broken, as some people indeed are saying in the House of Commons and elsewhere. That would be inaccurate. And again, it would be insulting to most Canadians to
so
pretend
let's
that
get back
is
to what the Procurement Ombudsman said. Do you agree with the Procurement Ombudsman when he talks about the procurement system being broken?
I can turn to official, but I would be surprised if the Procurement Ombudsman had said, like you did, that everything is broken in Canada.
He said, and I quoted it for you, sir, that the Canadian system is kind of near the bottom tier. And he said that the contract system is broken.
I have to interrupt. That is our time. We'll go to Mr. Kusmirchuk. Perhaps you can address it during that time period. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Minister Duclos, for being here with us once again at OGO Committee. Always excellent talking to you and always wonderful getting your insights. I wanted to talk about a very important program in my community, which is the Canada Dental Care Plan. There are 15,000 people in Windsor, Essex, 15,000 that have received dental care because of our Canada Dental Care Plan. A large proportion of that are seniors. It is incredibly important. And I got a chance to speak with our Seniors Advisory Council just this week, and they emphasized how important the dental care plan was and is for our community. You know, the Conservatives keep opposing the Canada Dental Care Plan, and when they're not opposing it, they're denying that it even exists. To quote the leader of the opposition, he says not a single tooth has been cleaned. Again, 15,000 residents in Windsor, Essex would vehemently disagree with his assessment, if you can call it that. I wanted to ask you if you can provide an update on the rollout of the Canada Dental Care Plan that is helping literally 15,000 residents and seniors in my community already today. Can you provide us with a bit of an update on this program?
This is indeed an example of procurement that is making a huge difference in the lives of millions of Canadians. Now we have 3 million Canadians registered for the Canada Dental Plan. It is indeed worrying and, in fact, upsetting to hear the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, pretend that this does not exist and discourages more seniors from registering into that program. In Conservative ridings, including in MP Genuis riding, we now have almost 5,000 people having registered, and his leader says it doesn't exist. So imagine that. It doesn't exist. And 5,000 in this, and MP Bloc, almost 5,000 too. Now, they would obviously want to keep promoting that because you have our 15,000 in your own writing here, Eric, because of the advocacy that you are doing, you know, the sharing of information, the encouragement, and not misleading seniors in not registering for the Canada Dental Plan. So it makes a huge difference, and I would encourage you to keep doing your great work.
Chair, just a point of order. What in the world does this have to do with the estimates for the procurement?
We always allow a very wide breadth for discussion. So continue, Minister. Thank you.
The potted plant is on its way, Mr. Chair.
Continue, Minister.
Yes, MP Kuzi, almost 4,000 in her writing, and yet her leader, Pierre Poilievre, says it doesn't exist. So that's very bad. It's funny, perhaps, but it's very bad because it discourages more seniors in those writings from registering, because there are indeed some issues within conservative writings, people not knowing enough about the Canada Dental Care Plan. But overall, it's great news. 93% of providers, dentists, hygienists, and denturologists have registered. I would point that the NDP has played a key role in that. Without the NDP support, this would not have happened, because the Conservatives and the Bloc have done everything they could, including in the estimates that we have voted just this week, to stop this program from going on. And the question is about why does it matter now? In the estimates process, there are important investments to support the enrollment, the development of that important dental care plan. So thank you, Eric, for all that you do.
Well, thank you very much, Minister. And on that point, I noticed my colleague, Mr. Genuis, very eager to join this conversation. So I hope, Minister, you get a chance to ask him personally whether, as the MP for his riding, whether he supports the Canada Dental Care Plan that has provided such a benefit to thousands of residents in his riding. I'd love for you to ask him that question today, if you do get a chance. But I wanted to move on to another subject matter, which is national defense, which is so absolutely critical to Canada. And Minister, this last month, I got a chance to actually tour the HMCS Harry DeWolf, which is the first Arctic and offshore patrol ship, AOPS ship, that was docked in Windsor, Essex. We had the entire community coming out to tour this incredible ship, and I got a chance to meet with Commander John Nicholson and his crew there. Absolutely amazing. And they talked about how these investments in these AOPS and these patrol ships is helping us to defend our Arctic sovereignty and strengthen defense. Can you just talk about the progress on the remaining vessels in this class, any notable achievements or challenges that were encountered in the construction as well too? Because it was a magnificent ship, incredible crew, and I just wanted to ask a little bit of an update on that, please.
Eric, I'll turn soon to the Deputy Minister Simon, who will provide details. But at a very high level, the national shipbuilding strategy is leading to the creation or sustainment of about 20,000 jobs every year. It's also leading to significant successes on the international stage. We know how important it is in 2024 to be able to fight for the interests of Canadians here in Canada and outside of Canada, their security. We are doing this obviously in support to and collaboration with the United States. We have just signed a couple of weeks ago an icebreaker collaboration effort pact with the government of Finland and the United States. This is remarkable. This is going to build on the important progress that we've made in the last years on the national shipbuilding strategy, including building these AOPS and other ice-breaking
I have
ships.
to interrupt. That is our time. We'll now go to Mrs. Vignola. The floor is yours for 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur Duclos.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank Minister Duclos for appearing here today. Thank you for joining us today. Mr. Duclos, my questions, well, they're not mine, but that of the writings across Canada that I received for the dental care services which you mentioned a moment ago, I would mention that it's a good idea for people to be able to get that treatment at all ages. But this question comes from a lady from my riding, and the question is, why should I have a Sun Life card when in Quebec we have civil servants who could use the insurance health card in order to access dental care, especially with children? That was her first question, and I was wondering, could you maybe remind us how much the management contract cost Sun Life, and how many people could have been able to access that care if the amount was transferred to Quebec in respect of their jurisdiction and competencies? Excellent question. Thank you, Julie, for asking that question. The RAMQ, which is the Quebec Health Card, and dental care should have been part of health insurance 50 years ago in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada. It was not done in spite of the hopes back then, which makes it such that dental care is not covered except for really specific segments of the population in Quebec and elsewhere in the country. In Quebec, it's only covered for children under 10, and for certain services in particular, it excludes most preventive care treatments, which are really important for children in their development and health. And for other Quebecers, there's really little coverage. So in Quebec, more than everywhere else across Canada, the need is quite stark, and we noticed it over the past months. And a third of members of this plan are Quebecers. Mr. Duclos, the question from my writing is, why does she need a Sun Life card instead of the health transfers being made to Quebec so that she can be able to use her RAMQ card? For two reasons. The first one is that the Quebec RAMQ does not cover dental care for the majority of Quebecers. And the second reason is that Sun Life is working quite efficiently. 95% of suppliers of providers in Quebec are registered, and dentists, denturologists, and hygiene experts would be quickly paid, and it would be easier for them to take care of these patients, especially the most vulnerable ones who would not be able to be covered. Thank you. So if these health transfers had been made, which is the opinion of my the individual in my writing, they would have been able to use their health insurance card, which wasn't the case in the past. Having said this, in terms of dental care, I still receive emails from people whom, when they report to their dentist office, they are told, well, no, it is not covered because I'm not part of the agreement, and because I was not able to complete the process. It is lengthy and not easy to navigate. So next time, go to another dentist. So they have to look up dentists who are equally loaded with clients. So why is it such that certain dentists and denturologists, and I have one who wrote to me that they've been waiting for 4 months in order to have partial implants because the process is so long that they were advised to meet with a different denturologist. So why is the process so lengthy? Why is it so convoluted? And why is it such that these people, contrary to promises, are not able to get the care which they really need? So most providers who are in Quebec are registered, and too many more enrolling in the program. 3, they're dentists and denturologists and hygienists who already have significant client base, and they continue to provide services. And in order to find these services, simply type dental care, and this will take you to a web page where you can put in your postal code and find the dentist or denturologist or hygienist that's closest to you. And it's rare that you find one on that web page who is not registered. So we know that there are few of them. And generally, the challenges are mainly for the providers, and they are invited and encouraged to contact Health Canada. Thank you. Now, I'll talk about the fact that Canada Life received the management contracts in terms of administering these insurance, the civil servants insurance plans. Canada Life has made improvements. We'll give you that, but it's their contractor MSH who doesn't seem to understand. Now, retirees from the civil service are equally under Canada Life. like active civil servants. Now, how much did it cost how much did it cost for retirees of the civil service to get the health plan under Canada Life? I'll address your first question, and the second one I'll invite my colleagues to address more specifically. Now, with regard to the improvements that you've realized over the past months, it's among other reasons, the fact that you pointed to some of the difficulties that we had in the system from the onset, and most of these challenges have been addressed for the most part, and there's still some challenges, and this is frustrating, especially for those abroad. We encourage all MPs, like you did, to highlight these issues so that Canada Life can do its job. How much it costs exactly, I'm not sure.
Session. Mr. Boulouris, go ahead, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for appearing here today with your entire army that's here to support you. I'm quite interested in the fact that the Bloc Québécois is asking questions on the dental plan, because were it not for the NDP and negotiations to force the government to provide this dental care, it would never have happened. And I'm proud that over 1 million Quebecers are now enrolled in this dental care plan, and over 325,000 have already accessed dentists and received dental care, and paid in part or in total by this federal program. And I'm really proud of this, because this is something that at the NDP we really pushed hard for, contrary to the Bloc. I'd like to ask a question on the digital portal at the Border Services Agency. CBC Radio informed us that it cost close to $500 million for service that concerns customs and import duties on certain goods and services, and that this portal in a month reported 20 inconsistencies in a very short time. And now we have $500 million of public funds that were invested, and it's not working. And this is something that had been in place since 2010. So it's been 14 years that the federal government is working on this, and it costs over $500 million, and it's still not working. It's broken. Thank you, Mr. Boulouris, Alexandre. Now, on the dental care plan, very quickly, you're right to state that your support was critical, and we would like to laud your efforts on that file, and we want to mention that it's not complete so far, because from 2025, 1 million additional Quebecers aged 18 to 64 will be eligible for this dental care plan. So there's a lot of work to do in the first half of 2025, and we appreciate your continuous collaboration. Now, with regard to the portal for the Canada Border Services Agency, you're right to state that it's a critical service that has cost quite a lot of money over the past years. This is a system that is absolutely necessary, because the former 35-year-old system was close to crumbling at any moment. And we have infrastructure, and when you set up infrastructure, there's always problems and hiccups from the beginning, and it's important to recognize and acknowledge these problems. I mean, we've been on this since 2010. We're in 2024. It's been 14 years, but we started rolling out the program only a few weeks ago. So in spite of all the efforts that were made, and I'd maybe ask the team to chime in, there's still some challenges with reliability and clarity in the system, which are currently being addressed in real time, and also questions that people are asking on the ground, because it's a new system and people need some time to acclimatize. And the response time for the questions that are addressed is not sufficient enough. So we need to invest more in that, and while waiting for employees to, hone their skills. And yes, there's been hiccups for the first weeks, and there's been 5 million declarations that were processed over the past weeks, and this system needs to be able to address that demand. And if you like, Alexandre, I can ask other civil servants to chime in. So 22 breakdowns in several hours in a month for something that costs more than $500 million is unacceptable for most people. So Scott would probably recognize that it's not entirely under his purview, but I think maybe you can discuss further how we address this. Thank you very much. The system which we replaced was 36 years old, so it was important for border services to have a new system, and this has reduced significant amount of risk for the infrastructure. But for operational systems, my partner from the Canada Border Service agencies can address this. But on the part of Shared Services Canada, we will support border services. We support them every day to maintain the systems in operation, but I do not have the details of the issues with the system that were delivered. Thank you very much. My other question for the time that I still have left for this first round, $441 million that you're asking for supplementary appropriation. So 46% of that money will be channeled to contractors, whereas your government committed to reduce our dependency on external services. In spite of that, you continue to have a significant reliance on contractors and subcontractors and external services. How do you explain this 46% of consultants, $391 million? That's quite a lot, no? Well expressed. We know that this dependency was really necessary during the COVID years, and right now it's quite significant, and we're trying to shrink this by 15% this year, but we need to do even more in the coming months and coming years.
Oh, Mrs. Kusi.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et bienvenue, Monsieur Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the Minister for appearing. This is our committee. Thank you for appearing this committee this morning.
Found committing fraud against the government. Last time you were here in November, the number was 7. How many is that number at today, please?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question. I am happy that we can talk about the procurement system, because this plays a key role for Canada, workers and businesses, and it's really key for government and Canadians. And for such a system, I'm waiting for the number from you. You're the minister, so in my view, you should be able to tell us how much. And yes, you're entitled to knowing the exact numbers and the up-to-date figures. Quickly, because I have many questions.
The respect we're supposed to afford other members of our house, including ministers, and so I would just remind Ms.
I
Kusi to
appreciate
not
that.
yell.
Respect goes both ways. There was a very clear question. I think taxpayers and MPs deserve a very clear answer.
Point of order.
Continue. Go ahead.
It's more about the yelling at the minister than the question. Thank you.
I'm sure Mrs. Kusi will take that under advisement, but continue, Mrs. Kusi.
Yeah, it is a very clear question, Minister. How many cases of fraud? Please tell Canadians just the number. Do you know the number?
Et si je comprends bien votre question, la réponse.
If I understand your question, yes, I already asked you in English and in French. What is the number, please? The answer is 7 cases, 3 that were announced last spring, 1 that added in July, and 3 others over the past weeks.
Comme vous le suggérez.
Civil servants, as you suggested, and as is important, are continuing to do the work on integrity. It's much easier now with the electronic procurement system and with information sharing. Thank you. And what's the value of these 7 contracts, these fraudulent contracts? What's the amount, the dollar amount? For the specific amount, Deputy Minister, do you have the number?
Would you?
Donc, on pourrait vous attendre.
Every effort that needs to be put into this is being put into this. Obviously, this is a politically independent process. We wouldn't want politicians, whoever they may be, to undermine the ability of the independent public service officers to do that job. So it's not a matter of how many I think there should be.
Okay,
It's
so
how
you've
many the
said
public
that you
service-
don't want to undermine public service officers doing their job. Then, in your opinion, please, Minister, do you believe all of the scandals, including the billions lost to CEBA, which we just found out about last week through the Auditor General, as well as the millions spent on ArriveCan, as well as McKinsey, that the procurement officials then you're saying are the ones who Canadians are to blame for this large number, this millions of dollars, which I believe it's actually significantly more than that. But what do you believe it's your officials to blame then, Minister?
You're asking whether we should be blaming officials?
I'm asking you what you think, why it's currently $4.5 million for 7 contracts. What do you think? Why do you think? And I think the number is way more than that. And we've seen these numbers increase consistently, whether we're talking contracts, fraud, the debt, the deficit. But in this case, the fraudulent contracts of 7, why do you think that's occurring, please?
So as you're correctly suggesting, officials have the obligation to do whatever they can in an independent manner, not focus on politics and politicians, to do whatever they need to do to find out instances of fraud, and if there are such instances of fraud, to do whatever they need to do, including with the RCMP and other law enforcing institutions, to collect and recollect the amount that would have been paid inappropriately.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned politicians. Minister, I just wanted your ideas as to what you believe your leader, the Prime Minister, is doing to the Finance Minister. We've seen 2 days of leaks in the Globe and Mail, and we know now that he has forced his radical spending on your Finance Minister, Minister Freeland, and that he has forced her to break the $40 billion deficit. And in fact, we just found out today, just today, that he is begging Mark Carney, carbon tax Carney, conflict of interest Carney, to serve as the next finance minister of Canada. So your prime minister, who actually is overseeing all of this procurement, all of this fraud under CEBA, under ArriveCan, I have some sympathy for you, that he is now going to oust the first female finance minister in Canadian history. Do you think that's right?
I apologize, Minister. That is our time, but perhaps you can respond in Mr. Sousa's 5 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Sousa, please.
Minister, thank you for being here, and apologies for some of the antics across the way. And the disrespect is really unfortunate, because I do appreciate, I think most Canadians appreciate the work that's being done to try to bring transparency and greater order to procurement. Thousands and thousands of contracts are done by the Canadian government, and some are not done properly, as we have investigated, and as members of the team have ventured to correct. And my question, I have 3 actually. One is in regards to the Canada Land Bank. In my community of Mississauga Lakeshore, 1 Port Street, Canada Lands is the property owner of a beautiful property marina in the area. A lot of revitalization has been done in the community, and they're very grateful for that and continuing. And the residents are eager to see this revitalization. So I'm asking you if you can talk about how your department is working to convert underutilized and vacant properties into housing.
Thank you so much, Charles, and thank you for pointing to the Federal Lands Initiative in your riding and across Canada. We know and feel how stressful it is for Canadians to go through the housing crisis. The good news is that we have in Budget 2024 the most important housing investments ever seen in the history of Canada. That is going to transform the lives of millions of Canadians. We're going to build millions of homes, many of them, and hopefully most of them affordable. And that comes through the leadership of PSPC. As you said, PSPC is an important supporter of that initiative, but more broadly, PSPC is key. We have $34 billion in procurement activities every year, 400,000 contracts and amendments. We have 800,000 active security clearances every year, and we have a large number of them being checked and reviewed every year too. But coming back to the Federal Lands Initiative, and the Canada Lands Company in particular, they're going to build approximately 29,000 new homes in the next 5 years on federal lands. And that's in addition to and in complementary to the Federal Lands Bank initiative that you have noted. We now have 83 properties in that bank as of now. We started in August, and that we're going to build approximately 35,000 new homes in the years to come. And we hope that your leadership and the leadership of other MPs around the room will help connect communities, mayors, councillors, not-for-profit housing providers to speed up the construction of those new homes.
Thank you, Minister. Another issue of concern in my community, and just 2 days ago, there was a town hall regarding health, guns and safety issues, crime. And a lot of reforms have been done by the federal government to try to strengthen those issues and trying to persuade now the provincial authorities to proceed more effectively in enforcing the law. But it's clear to me that there are a number of measures that the government's taken to support strong gun control measures, right? And I'm actually quite appalled to see members of the opposition working with the gun lobby in an attempt to weaken those very gun laws. And we're talking about assault rifles and so forth. Can you explain how this government is taking assault-style firearms in our communities through the buyback program that is, in fact, part of the PSPC? And Minister, regardless of what the members of the opposition are saying, it is part of the work that you are doing at PSPC with regards to the gun buyback program.
And indeed, it belongs partly to PSPC and public safety as well. A quick reminder, in 2020, we banned about 1,500 models of weapons that have no place in Canada, in civil society
Chair,
in Canada.
Can you ask them to please settle down? We're trying to hear the answer.
Are you referring to the minister or
I'm referring to the
colleagues
opposition. The opposite.
Okay.
And Chair, I don't appreciate that as well. I mean, it's really
Charles.
unfortunate.
You're right, because I believe opposition.
Sorry, Minister, just I'll pause the time. Colleagues, if you allow.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Souza already heard the answers during practice, though, didn't he?
Yeah, not a point of order.
That's not
Minister, please continue and go ahead, Mr. Souza.
I think it's a good gesture on your part, Charles, for everyone to be able to hear that story, because it's going to be important in the weeks to come as we unroll the phase 1 of the buyback program from shops, and then the phase 2 from individuals who legitimately and totally legally bought these assault-style rifles years ago. But these weapons are designed for wars. They are designed to kill as many people as possible in as little time as possible. That's why we outlawed 1,500 models of those firearms in 2020. Last Friday, we added another 324 models because the gun industry is very creative in designing and then producing new assault-style weapons. That is why this week, we're putting into place a firearms reference table, which will automatically update that list of prohibited assault-style weapons.
Thank you,
and my
gentlemen.
department,
That is our
in collaboration with others, will be there to unroll
Madam
the
Vignola,
procurement,
please.
the buyback
Sorry,
program.
Minister, our time is up. Madam Vignola, the floor is yours for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, I'd like to remind you the first statement that I mentioned during my first 6 minutes. The dental care is good, but interference is a major difference. Having said this, I put a question earlier which we didn't have the time to cover. The contract with Canada Life for dental care with government retirees, how much did it cost? Well, I know that we're hearing a lot about interference. There's no interference. Rather, there's help that's provided to the Quebec government because some people can't go to the dentist. I'm sorry, this was not a question. It was a comment. My question is, how much did it cost the government to secure a dental care plan for civil service retirees? Well, I'll continue in a positive light. As you mentioned, it's important for Quebecers, and in my opinion, there's no interference, but rather support to the Quebec government. And for the exact amount, I will refer to the Deputy Minister. Well, I'll get back to the clerk with a specific answer, specific number. Thank you. Now, very often I go to the previous Canada buys and in the markets section, I see that there's an opportunity for cities, municipalities, and even universities like that of British Columbia, like Concordia. Why is it that there's no more opportunities for the government now? Taxpayers not only pay for offers from Canada, but for all that is published across Canada. Well, this is an invitation. It is not an obligation that is placed on provinces and certainly not municipalities. We're inviting them to take advantage, to avail themselves of this website that is already in place and that brings together multiple thousands of service providers across the country. Very quickly, recently, our country mentioned the number of persons per riding with dental care plans, and we found the numbers, but by province. How can citizens have access to the number as the government per riding? Well, as a matter of fact, we have easy access, as you mentioned, to data per province, and two, we have internal data that we're trying to fine tune because it's not very specific yet, and we're trying to look at the number of people enrolled per riding, and we're trying to fine tune this in order to make it available to all MPs. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, you were kind enough by mentioning that the dental care plan was helped to the Quebec government. I'll go further and say that this program helps Quebecers first and foremost, and that was our priority and our first mission, to help the Quebec government and also help people who did not have access to dentists. You talked about the issue of housing in your introductory statement. You talked about the fact that the federal government could help with long-term leases in order to help build affordable homes. How much money are we talking about on how many pieces of land and affordable homes, but how affordable are they? I know it's many questions, three of them. Well, all very relevant questions, and it would be difficult to address all of them accurately. Now, for the number of properties right now in the lands bank that's available on the CIP website, if you go to federal lands website, you see already available lands. There are 3 in my riding, and there's equally some probably in yours, 83 that in addition to the 3 updates over the past month, with an objective of over 35,000 homes built, a good chunk of them affordable, and with amphitheatric leases. I mean, what proportion of those are affordable? And when we talk about affordability, is it based on people's revenue? Is it based on the average rent cost in the region? It depends on local definitions. In Quebec, for instance, we have 2 definitions. There's one depending on people's revenue, and the other one on the average rent amount in the community. So it depends on the cities where we will be constructing these homes, and there'll be additional support from the Canadian government, because making these lands available free of charge to construction or partners working in non-profits, cooperatives, and low-cost housing businesses, making these lands available free of charge in the long term for them is really interesting, because it reduces the cost involved in purchasing those lands. And this is additional support in the sense that if you want to build really affordable homes, so social housing in particular, and also green housing and close to public transport amenities, as well as all the different amenities, it requires additional budget. So are you going to invest in that light? Yes, we will invest, not just to make these lands available, but even go further and have more affordable homes.
Good to see you, Minister, and wishing you well in the upcoming Shuffle sweepstakes. You mentioned at the beginning a grading system, and I want to ask, if you were to give a letter grade to the effectiveness and integrity of the procurement system over the last 9 years, what letter grade would you give?
Well, thank you, MP Generous. We see each other in many circumstances over the last week. I appreciate the fact that you're asking good questions on procurement and implicitly recognizing that
I'll appreciate when you answer them.
Yes, I'm coming to that, obviously.
I doubt it. Go
so
ahead.
the fact that you're asking those questions about integrity also suggests that you value.
Sir, just give me a letter grade though. Like it's not a difficult question. I'll get to the difficult ones later. But how would you rate your performance, the performance of the government's procurement department over the last 9 years? Just give me a letter grade.
Well, in the last 9 years, I can speak obviously to the number of thousands of lives that were saved during COVID-19 because of vaccine.
I'll give you 10 seconds to give me a letter grade. Go ahead.
So yes, you can also speak about the national shipbuilding strategy, which is sustaining the jobs of about 20,000 workers every year.
Okay, time's up. Honestly, if I were the minister and I had your record, I would not want to give a letter grade either. Minister, if a third party auditor flags that there's fraud on a particular procurement file and recommends that it be referred to the RCMP, what should the government do in that case? Another fairly easy question, I think.
What it should do is that exactly what you're probably also thinking is that it should take those allegations very seriously, and expect and demand that public service, independently of political interference, do the job that they need to do.
And what is that job? If an independent auditor says there's fraud, we think it should be referred to the RCMP. The public service should then refer it to the RCMP, right?
Yeah. Well, the public service
should they
is a big not every.
Sir, we're still on the easy stuff. If a third party auditor says that hypothetically a procurement file involving the Canadian Healthcare Agency involved fraud, and that third-party auditor says it in a meeting with multiple public servants from multiple departments, saying we think it involves fraud, we think it should be referred to the RCMP. Should they take it seriously and refer it to the RCMP, or should they take it seriously and try to bury it? What would you suggest?
Well, you spoke about hypothetical, and hypothetical cases are not truly useful cases to discuss in such general terms. I think you need to be more specific as to what exactly you have in mind.
Okay, I have in mind the case this committee heard about this week from Gary Hartle, who was an independent auditor who brought a room full of public servants evidence of Indigenous identity fraud on the government years ago, and recommended that the case be referred to the RCMP. The government decided, in his words, they didn't want any trouble and decided to bury it instead of referring it to the RCMP. Do you think that was a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, MP Jen, this is a great question, which I heard you ask.
And I look forward to a great answer.
Exactly just a few days ago to Minister Aidu, and she provided all the answers that you were correctly expecting of her, because it's in her file, it's her department. You know that?
No.
Ask her directly those same
PSPC
questions.
officials were in the room, sir. Your officials were in the room. I think at a basic level, in terms of setting the tone, now would be a good time for you to advise your officials and the public that when they become aware of instances of fraud, they should refer that fraud to the RCMP. And you seem unwilling to say that.
Je peux le dire en français si en anglais ça fonctionne moins bien. Mais
I can say then in French, if it's not working into English, we had a meeting where you were present, Mr. Generous, with Minister Aidu, and you asked exactly the same question, and she provided you with the proper responses. So if you want to have a conversation with Ms. Ailu, you can do that, but you had that conversation a few months ago.
Welcome you. Neither. C'est une question très simple. Si c'est une...
It's a really simple question. So if it's a case of fraud,
and since your officials were in the room, should they have given that information to the RCMP or buried it? And I wonder, frankly, how many other cases are there? But can you just clearly tell your officials and the public that instances of fraud, when officials become aware of them, should be referred to the RCMP? Yes or no?
j'ai déjà répondu à cette question à plusieurs reprises.
I've already addressed the question on several occasions, Mr. Alois, and Ms. Naidu addressed the question on several occasions as well. The same question a few days ago. I think maybe you just have to return and see what her response was, and it'll be easy to understand.
A simple yes
Okay.
to a very simple question. That's
Thank you.
truly unbelievable.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll go to Mrs. Atwin to finish up the hour, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Minister and officials, for joining us today. I'll switch gears a little bit. I'm really proud to represent a vibrant bilingual community. So I'm from New Brunswick, which is our only bilingual constitutionally protected province. Vote 1B includes 9.6 million for the Translation Bureau to provide linguistic services to Parliament. Can you speak, about the importance about the Translation Bureau for minority language communities like those in New Brunswick, but also just in general the importance of interpretation services for the workings of Parliament?
Merci beaucoup, Jenica.
Thank you very much. And we know that you are a proud representative of your riding and that you have that ability to be a proud representative of the diversity of gender in your writings. It can be felt in your values and in your action. Yes, we are privileged to have a really bilingual country where people who prefer working and especially here in the Canadian government, you are entitled to express yourself in the official language of your choice. And the investments in the Translation Bureau, which are part and parcel of the expenditure estimates, are really crucial. And I know that some of the interpreters are probably following today. We know how crucial their work is and how difficult it is in our work. And we're grateful and need to have the necessary tools to do their job properly, including the tools to protect them and protect their hearing health. And in addition to this, as you mentioned, it allows the Francophones who live in your riding and other Francophones across the country, especially those here in the House of Commons, to be able to do their work and to support their communities.
Where MP Idlout was able to speak in her Inuktitut language, and we've had access to translation services. Can you speak to any efforts to expand access to Indigenous languages at the interpretation level?
An equally excellent question. I would like to provide you with really specific response. Madam Deputy Minister, can you provide a response?
As well as increasing access to Indigenous interpreters, working with various First Nations and communities to bring people to Ottawa or look at hybrid parliament in a way that will have better and increased access. Thank you.
Excellent. And also, Budget 2024 explained about how labor shortages and resource constraints have strained translation services. Can you speak to how the Translation Bureau is working to resolve those labor shortages in the medium to long term?
That's the most important one is to support those translators that we currently working for the federal government and to ensure their safety and their health in particular. The second piece is to assist other organizations train new interpreters and translators. Just a few weeks ago, I was able to announce in my own city an important partnership with Université Laval that was going to lead to them creating a new micro program on interpretation and translation. Up to 10 new students will graduate every year. This is great for my city, obviously, but we're doing similar things in other parts of Canada so that we have a new and continuing flow of new talents and people into supporting the translation and interpretation services here in the House of Commons in the Parliament.
Excellent. Thank you. And just with my remaining time, I've got about a minute left. Maybe I will return to the Indigenous procurement piece because it's certainly it's been a hot topic here in the House of Commons. But I'm also, I listened to a lot of the witness testimony, and it's about improving access for Indigenous businesses. Can you speak to how PSBC is encouraging participation of Indigenous businesses?
This has to be the top priority because there are about 2,900 Indigenous businesses registered in the Indigenous Business Directory, although we know that there are approximately 60,000 Indigenous businesses in Canada. So there are many Indigenous businesses have yet to to be able to support the needs of the federal government and therefore to support their workers and their communities by participating fully in the procurement system. So we have Procurement Assistance Canada, we have an equity plan, an engagement strategy, which is not entirely, but somewhat focused on reaching out to, informing, encouraging, and supporting Indigenous businesses across Canada, including in your own riding.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Minister. We will excuse you. Thanks for joining us again. Have a wonderful Christmas. We're going to suspend for about 2 minutes to excuse the minister and get the next witnesses set up. Good afternoon. We are back in session with our officials now for an hour. We're going to start with Mrs. Block, please, for 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Bonet, I'm going to direct a number of my questions to you. I was very interested to see a request for additional funds for NextGen in the supplementary estimates, especially since I had put a request into the minister's office for a briefing on NextGen and have yet to hear anything back. That was over a month ago. As of June 10th, 2024, the government had spent just shy of $80 million on this new system. As the person in charge of the development of the NextGen pay system, can you please explain to the committee why you need $102 million over the next few months when you've spent less than that over the past few years?
Yes, thank you. The difference is that we are in a period where we are designing and configuring the new solution. So we're moving beyond analysis to actually configuring the new solution with Dayforce. It also is money that will be used to continue to develop our AI capability to clean the backlog so that we can transition to a new system. So we are moving into a different phase of the project where we want to prove feasibility by the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, so ramping things up, so to speak, from the previous period. You have held a number of positions, both inside and out of government over the past few years. Did you ever work for Mindforce AI?
If you refer to MindBridge, yes.
MindBridge AI.
Correct.
Okay, when did you work for them? What was the time period that you worked with them?
I can get you the exact dates, but it would have been immediately after my departure from government.
So the government was your employer directly prior to your time with MindBridge AI. Is there a cooling off period when you are moving to the private sector after holding a senior position in government, such as a CIO?
Yeah, there is, and there's a procedure through the ethics commissioner, which I followed.
I do have a copy of an email that was sent from you to Mr. Mindon on August 21st, 2019. I believe you were still employed by the government at that time. And you were seeking to set up a demo for MindBridge AI, who were your soon-to-be employers using your personal email. Does this contact between you and a senior government official constitute a violation of the required cooling off period?
I'd have to check the dates and come back to you, to be honest with you, and I'm happy to do that.
Thank you very much. We'd appreciate receiving that in writing. These emails fall within the time frame of emails that Mindon deleted. Were you aware of that? Okay, it seems a little suspicious that all of these emails disappeared, and we would appreciate if you would get that information to us.
I'm going to just pause the clock for 1 second. Just to advise you, the committee has passed a motion requiring all requests to be responded to within 21 days.
Chair, Ms. Race, I'll turn to you. In the estimates, there is a line asking for $464 million, I believe, for funding for Public Services and Procurement Canada, organizational project management capacity assessment, investment planning, and enabling authorities. That's quite a mouthful. Can you tell us what this is for? And is this assessment being run in-house, or is there an external contractor doing this work?
Thank you very much. And I'm going to have to turn to my CFO to confirm whether this is the $469 million that's part of the capital that's associated with our ask in SUPs as it relates to some various projects like Place du Portage, Westman, and Parliamentary Precinct. There may be project management associated with the the engineer and the A&E, but just let me confirm that.
Yeah, perhaps we could just clarify the 400, where you're taking the 400 million from.
It's 1B. It's vote 1B, funding for Public Services and Procurement Canada, organizational project management capacity assessment, investment planning, and enabling authorities.
So this would be part of the 620 million that we're requesting as part of supplementary estimates B, which includes it's capital funding primarily to support the projects that Madame Reza mentioned.
I appreciate that answer. I'd also like to follow up on a question that I asked the minister regarding money, recovering money, or perhaps just ask a question in regards to recovering money from the fraudsters that have managed to defraud the government over a period of time. At the Public Accounts Committee, you and your officials testified that negotiations were ongoing with these individuals to get money back. Can you please explain to us the nature of these negotiations, and why are you even negotiating with them instead of actually demanding that they pay the money back?
Thank you very much for the question, and it also gives me an opportunity. Earlier, I confirmed the number of cases that we have sent to the RCMP 7. That number stands. I think there was a question around how much money is owed or do we anticipate on the fraud. I said 4.5 million, which is only partially accurate as we're still continuing to assess those that were referred in November. So that number will likely go up. On the 4.5 million, we anticipate recovering 2.1 million, 2.2 million before the year end. To the question about why it's taking us so long, we just started in the last few months with a new authority that Treasury Board gave us to actually act as the collection agent on behalf of the Government of Canada. So we didn't have that before. And the next piece is, as I've indicated at previous committee hearings, it's at the consultant level. It's at the consultant. So sometimes the supplier themselves are unaware that consultant is working with a different firm and that there's defrauding going on. What we have done now,
I'm afraid that is past our time. So we're going to go over to our next. I'm sorry, that is our time, Ms. Reza. I'm sure perhaps Mr. Baines can give you an opportunity to finish. Mr. Baines, the floor is yours for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our officials for joining us today. I'm going to ask a question around I'm looking at what the current status is. If you could provide an update on the NextGen HR and pay project and any recent milestones that may have been achieved there.
Just wanted to start by going back, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, to note that if there's any interest in having an HR NextGen Pay Phoenix briefing, we stand at the ready to support that. Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're happy to report that we've started testing of certain components of the NextGen solution or Dayforce with SSC and PSPC at this point. The tests are proceeding very well. We are to report that our AI virtual assistant agent with the Pay Center to help them process cases. So we are gaining 30% efficiency as it is, and we anticipate being able to process cases up to 50% by the time the fiscal year completes, and gain in efficiency. We also have a lot of work that's been done with regards to starting to create consistent HR measures in town. For example, hiring on the day after pay. Many large corporations around the world force you to start the day after pay to not have pay impacts. And so we're starting to put those in place as well with the current system. So there is quite a bit of development going on, and happy to have that briefing, as Aliane mentioned.
And like, what measures are in place to test this and validate the new system before it's fully implemented?
Great point. So we will not be deploying a big bang approach as we did last time and harvesting savings early. We will be doing this in an iterative fashion, department by department. And so we're able to test progressively along every step of the way. In the case of PSPC and SSC, we have real users in the room currently. So the users are actually testing. We'll make all of the results public through our transparency by design program, which will enable us to release all the information.
You mentioned savings. I mean, we all know that the Phoenix Pay system was a complete disaster introduced by the previous government. What savings, if you can just expand on what you meant by that you didn't anticipate savings, and what's that? Because I know that was a complete disaster, the Phoenix Pay system.
We've learned as officials that we need to put the system in place first before we look at any kinds of savings discussion. And so right now what we're focused on this year and next is making sure that this system runs as best as possible. Our goal is to have a fully configured system by the end of That will be the reason that it's taking so long is that we do have to configure it and test it every step of the way. And there is no discussion of savings or any kind of harvesting of those savings until we actually have a very good grasp on the new system that we're putting together.
Right, and this is being carefully done because we clearly saw the challenges faced by the previous Phoenix pay system that the Harper government brought in, right?
Managed with care. We have made a decision to run two systems in parallel, so we know we will be running Phoenix for several years as we start deploying Dayforce. Should all go well this year. And for us, the running of two systems is to avoid some of the big bang situations so that we can course correct and avoid some of the mistakes of the past.
Then you talked about the AI, so leveraging the modern technologies to enhance the efficiencies and reliability. That testing, is it in its infancy right now? Whereabouts are you with that?
I would say in the testing phase, we are looking at 3 case types. So for example, actings, to be able to complete the work by the end of this fiscal year and then roll the solution out to other case types as we go through. But again, this is a case of doing things iteratively, step by step.
And anything to share on like the user friendliness? I think you mentioned that you would have to wait until the pay period's over. That's one great thing that you can instantly use, but user friendliness that public servants can employ in some manner. If you can talk a little bit about that.
The good thing with our AI solution is it's being developed with pay advisors. So they are in the room. We have a team of about 30 pay advisors that are helping to design the AI solution. So that means that this is a tool that they're developing for themselves, which is something that's a little bit different from the past, I would say.
So pay advisors, are they employees? Is that employees giving feedback? Okay, and then they're helping to shape ultimately how they use stuff, how they use the system, right?
The direction they're testing every step, and then we seek their feedback before deploying.
Okay, and then can you maybe explain? I wanted to just maybe go back to with the somebody could share about the public service procurement requesting 619 million in capital expenditures to allow departments to continue implementing projects such as some of the developments here that we're seeing at the center block and the scope of those projects.
There's been no time apart from like
okay
writing to the committee. We're going to go to Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Benny, I'll stay with you. It's a question. It's a clarification question. The Phoenix pay system was added under the Conservative government, but enforced under the Liberal government. Is that it? Yes, based on the dates. And we're over a few $1 billion, but for the NextGen or whatever the name is, how much in terms of investment? We're asking an extra 120 million, but how much has been invested so far for the testing, analysis, and designing this tool? With regard to NextGen, since 2018, we are 335 million, and out of this 335 million, 282 million comes from different budget items and internal funds of about 52 or 53 million. Of this total amount, 180 million was for wages, employees, training, etc. And the rest of it was paid to suppliers, service providers who were qualified in the shortlisted in the final process. So for these service providers, are they talking to one another, or each of them, they are working independently, and at the end you call it the entire effort together? Are they talking to one another before the final product is delivered? For now, the three are not necessarily talking to one another. The federal solution, the main solution, we anticipate that it will be day force, and if this year's work continues, most government departments, the expectation will be for them to use day force. Some departments will use other systems, but we would like these systems to be able to communicate with one another, and we hope to be able to run a test across all systems. But I think the main part of Canada's government departments will be using this system, and will ensure that there are no complications like the ones that we witnessed at the launching of RFCAN, because the suppliers weren't talking to one another and we had to make constant adjustments. Exactly. The first two departments I will work with will be working with Dayforce. Ms. Reza, Public Service and Procurement Canada is requesting $391.5 million for professional services and special services, and $42.6 million for staffing. Meaning that for staff, meaning that this is about 9 times less than special services. What are these special services, and why could we not have these services internally? Thank you for the question. Most of the money in the supplementary estimates for capital projects.
And those projects where professional services are involved are technical third-party engineering, construction, audit, things that the government doesn't do. So the construction sector is heavily involved. Alors la plupart, c'est des projets qui sont.
So most of them are projects that are currently closing across the National Capital Region. Thank you. And it is $391.7 million for these projects underway. Are these for consultants or only construction businesses, etc.? I will check and revert, but most of them, I think I can check with Matt Queenan, but most of them is for construction providers and civil engineering, and there's probably a certain level of professional services that are involved, but I don't know if we have a breakdown. No, I don't have the detail, but you're right, Madam, Mr. Chair. It's mainly for services like architects, engineers, technical services linked to construction projects. Thank you. As you know, we had the procurement ombudsman at appearing at this committee, and I looked at their budget, and his budget was has not changed in 15 years of existence, whereas inflation has been through the roof, and the wages of everyone have been increased in 15 years. The budgets of all government departments have seen an increase in 15 years, and the request for services for the ombudsman and the auditing services have equally seen an increase. From memory, I think they're now at 138 or 142% of what it used to be. Now, is there any plan in place to improve the budget that is earmarked for the ombudsman and services to the population? Thank you for the question. Yes, I observed that the ombudsman was here during this week, and we saw the request for additional funding, and we're currently reviewing this. And each time there's a request, and that we have to conduct a review on the part of committees, we do our best to always provide them with the funding, and we do what we can in order to protect and safeguard the budget, because the estimates come from the department. So this is always an opportunity to see how and where we can find the necessary funds to support the ombudsman.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Benny, I have questions for you because I find your story a bit unclear. The waiting period when you transition from the private to the public sector, you said you followed procedures. So according to you, what is that cool-off period? And as I mentioned, I'll return to my dates and see if I made any mistakes or not with regard to the cooling off period. But as far as the selection process for a company, I've had lots of discussions with the ethics commissioner on that issue, and is on that topic that I was referring to. Now, can you provide to the committee the date on which you were recruited by the Canadian government and the date on which, and the date of the last email that you sent out as a member of a private company? We would really appreciate having that information to be able to see what the timeline was. And like I mentioned, I'm going to provide that information. I just want to make sure that I have the right dates because I don't have that on my fingertips right now. I understand you, but I just want us to agree that this information will be provided for the committee. Another concern about what's happening is the genocide in Gaza, and there was a motion that was adopted in the House on stopping any sales of weapons to Netanyahu, the Netanyahu regime. What are you doing to ensure that licenses for weapon sales are suspended or stopped, and that no new licenses are issued or adopted? Thank you for the question. To begin with, I think it's the defense minister who can better address your question, but I'll see if there's something else that can be added from our part.
Non, merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I really don't have any information on the topic. We receive defense department's needs, and then we issue contracts. And these contracts are based on very specific needs that are articulated by the defense department. We're not involved in procurement of weapons outside the needs of our clients. Perfect. If you have any additional information, please submit them to the committee. It would be much appreciated. Another question is for the procurement of F-35s. This is a major contract. I was elected in 2011 for the first time, and we're already talking about acquiring these F-35s. We're concerned by the fact that there could be some components that are provided in Canada, that are produced in Canada in order to secure good jobs, good paying jobs in our country. So what can you do to ensure that these fighter jets, that we have our piece of the cake and that we're able to create and generate good jobs in our country? Thank you for the question. We are currently negotiating the contract as we speak, and we're trying to ensure that we put safeguards as much as possible around protecting small and medium-sized enterprises as well as major businesses. Maybe we can add. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. Now, in terms of procurement for this project, the procurement aspect for the F-35s is underway. We should have our jets at the planned time. When we signed the protocol, we are part of an agreement with several other countries, and this is a partnership that makes it such that everything is happens by consensus. And to address your question more specifically and complement what the Deputy Minister mentioned, with this contract came quite specific aspects on things that need to be done in country on the maintenance of these jets. The first one has to do with the structure of the plane itself. The other has to do with the engine. And with regard to the jet structure, things are going on smoothly. In terms of the engine, we have started a process. We put a lid on that for some time because the sequence of events was a bit too fast. So the minister announced quite recently that there was a partnership that was going to be established with a company in Mirabel in order to work on these jets when it comes to the platform. So the equipment, engine, as well as maintenance of these jets. The two major pieces would be maintaining the plane, what we call the airframe, and this would be done by our partner L3 Aris. And in terms of the engine, this would be part of a procurement process that we will launch in the short term. And after that, we'll have to sit down and look at the joint program with the USA to see what can be negotiated and what we can integrate in a Canadian-made solution.
I give it.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm not sure about that.
I'll take it.
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead, Mrs.
Okay.
Kusi.
Minutes, thank you. Madame Reza, why are contractors hired by this government completely unaware of fraud being committed by subcontractors against this government, please?
Thank you very much for this question. We have been working diligently to increase the code of conduct and reinforce the awareness with suppliers of their obligations and the flow through from the prime to their subs. So we concur with the assessment that there needs to be better awareness and accountability through the work that we're doing in terms of restitution, for example. As I started to say as an answer to the previous question, not only are we accelerating, we're now starting to move to court. So we are reinforcing very vigorously those responsibilities.
Why do you continue to negotiate with contractors that are responsible for their own contractors and therefore should ensure the work is actually being completed by the people that they hire?
Again, as we've noted, we're building this muscle. We started with, in the last 6 months, identifying the cases, using data mining, asking TBS for special authorities to be able to seek restitution from the companies. We're giving due recourse and a chance for them to cure, to say, hey, we've discovered a problem. You may not have been aware of it because this sub is working for a different supplier. You are likely not aware of it because if you were aware of it, it would be a supplier fraud. In a way, right now we're focusing on the subs, and we are really reinforcing expectations on them and shortening that negotiation period so they have a cure period to be able to fix it, make the government whole, and then move to court if they don't do so.
Thank you. Could you please provide the committee with the name of the general contractor that you are working with?
We have submitted to this committee the name of the 7 subs. They are across. So, for example, I think that in the first 4 instances that we referred to the RCMP, there were 35 suppliers implicated. So I'm not sure, and I don't know. I know Madame Poulin is on the phone. Perhaps she has more information. On the phone is a little bit old school, but she's attending virtually if she has more information available.
Okay. Why is it so difficult to ensure contractors and subcontractors are actually completing the work they've been asked to complete?
Thank you very much for the question. Again, there's many different lenses to that. Client departments have a responsibility to review the quality of the work that's being provided for them, either through goods or services or a construction contract. So it's a continuum of responsibility that I think that both here at PSBC and across the government, we're reinforcing those responsibilities, as well as putting that responsibility on the suppliers.
Are there any standards as to how many hours a certain project should take, or an analysis to ensure work is actually being completed?
Thank you very much for the question. I think there's 2 very key pieces to that. First, the business requirements are set by the client department. They've identified a need, whether it's a mandate or a government priority, to develop something. They work with their project management and their own business expertise to evaluate what they project. From the tendering and procurement process, we look at it as to estimate the time and quality and resources required. Thereon, the information is, or the tender is awarded, a contract is awarded. Subsequently, we look through task authorizations, verification, audit, contract management, which I think is something that this committee studies a lot in terms of ensuring that the work is done and accurately estimated.
Why did the president of the Treasury Board find it necessary to write in our updated manager's guide that contractors should not be paid unless the work has actually been completed?
Thank you very much. Again, that's probably best addressed to the Treasury Board Secretary that has the responsibility for the procurement system writ large. Perhaps they've noticed irregularities that needed to be anchored in policy.
How many companies have been paid but have not actually completed the work that the government was paying them to complete?
Again, I'm going to go back to the issue of the 7 cases where we found fraud in terms of overbilling for time as the anchor of what we have on our radar as we speak.
Much. Merci beaucoup.
And I just want to be quick. Mrs. Kusi was asking for the name of you mentioned subcontractors or sources. She was asking for the level above that you were negotiating with. Can you provide those to the committee, please, within the 21 days as requested? Thanks. We'll go to Mr. Sousa, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, guys. Can you provide an overview of the key responsibilities? I'm just trying to be nice, just trying to lighten up a little bit. Deputies, Ms. Reza, can you provide an overview of the key responsibilities and functions of the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance and how it collaborates with other departments and agencies to uphold the integrity of the federal procurement processes?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I will start and then I will turn to Madame Poulin, who is on the line with us. OSIC is a relatively new office established in early June. Its intent is to broaden what we had initially in place around our capacity to suspend and debar suppliers. So right now, we now have the latitude to look at where there's I'm going to say proceeds of terrorism, money laundering, human trafficking, a whole slew of different areas that we can now look at in terms of what's happening in the federal procurement system. We are now encouraging all client departments to be able to write to us, contact us where they suspect fraud, where they've sent something to the RCMP. It is our intent to look at the federal procurement system as a whole and identify areas where we can suspend and then potentially debar suppliers. This is a much broadened scope. It's relatively new. We're building those muscles. We don't necessarily need a client department to tell us there's a problem. It is our first line of default, though, or defense.
What limitations did your department face in addressing those supplier misconduct and ensuring the integrity of the procurement system under the previous government's integrity framework?
Catherine, je vais me tourner vers vous. Merci.
Catherine, I'll defer to you. Thank you very much for the question.
Authorities back in June of 2024, one of the main improvement to the policy, the ineligibility and suspension policy, is that we can now act without charges or conviction. So this is a very important achievement because the risk that those suppliers pose to the federal procurement system is not necessarily at the time of charges or convictions. So this is a very important achievement and change. And another point with the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance is that we're building data analytics capacity in order to detect more rapidly situations that we can face.
Well, thank you for that. And can you explain then the process for supplier to be declared ineligible or suspended from a federal contract?
Thank you so much for the question. So with the Office of Supplier Integrity and Compliance, I hold the title of Registrar of Ineligibility and Suspension. So in order for me to make decision, because I'm the decision maker under that policy, I have a very great team of experts that is looking at multiple sources of information to establish if that supplier can pose a risk to the federal government. If we find something, we send a notice of intent to suspend that supplier, and we gave them 10 days to reply to us because I need to offer fair and due process to those suppliers. So they have 10 days to come back to me and say why they should not be suspended. If I do not receive response, or if the response do not change the initial assessment, we declare that supplier suspended or ineligible depending on the cases. Once that determination is done, the name of the supplier will be posted on the web in order for other people to see that this supplier is or suspended or debarred from federal procurement.
Thank you for that. And does OSIC address, or how does it address in this case, concerns that have been related to human trafficking, forced labor, or other serious offenses in the supply chain?
Thank you for the question. So the policy, it's the main tool that we are using. So in the revised eligibility and suspension policy, we have added triggers in order for us to start the work in relation to human trafficking, environmental, social, other social triggers. So it gives us the ability when we find instances of human trafficking to start the dialogue with the supplier. So we have gone through a massive source of information. And if we find something, it means that now we can ask the supplier to provide us answers toward that, which was not possible before the OSIC was launched. Again, at the risk of repeating, we were only able to act under charges by law enforcement or conviction in a tribunal.
Thank you very much, both of you, and I appreciate your levity, Mr. Souza. Mrs. Vignola, go ahead, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My questions will be addressed to Mr. Page. Year after year, the Department of National Defense has challenges spending the amounts that are allocated to them. Do we find ourselves in the same situation, to your knowledge, this year? Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. So the numbers are managed by client departments. So to your question right now, those numbers would be managed by the Department of Defense. So if you want specifics around your question, maybe that question is better addressed to the Minister of Defense or National Defense. So what I can tell you for now is that in terms of the volume of contracts, of major contracts, we're talking about multi-million contracts, close to billions or multi-billions in terms of construction, naval construction or space, aerospace. And currently we've been working a lot on contracts in terms of technology, and there are many of them in number. And so what we need to understand is that these contracts are on the long term. So if I take, for instance, the question that was asked on the F-35s, that money is spread across a certain timelines for the procurement and including support. So this is not a major amount that appears in the statement of accounts of the National Defense Department immediately. But of course, numbers will rise. We'll see an increase in those numbers over the next years. So you're saying that we can expect our armed forces to have the necessary equipment that they need, and that the warehouses will be full in the months ahead and years ahead in terms of munitions, in terms of equipment, military equipment, and uniforms. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. Once more, it's another question that is best addressed to the National Defense. So when you talk about all the equipment and all that they need, well, I think they are the ones who will determine what they need and based on what they have currently. So we all take those needs and then we issue the contracts, procurement contracts. I like to think that this is done quite efficiently right now. Thank you. In terms of, thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to get back to the pay system. Everyone was quite traumatized by the Phoenix pay system, which costs a huge amount of money to the Canadian taxpayer and costs significant problems for the public service, federal public service employees. And now we're engaging new spending for something called Dayforce, I believe. I think we're all very, very much concerned, and tens of thousands of employees of the Canada federal government because they were traumatized with their Phoenix experience. What have you learned from Phoenix, and what are you doing differently to avoid that this catastrophe reoccurs? Thank you very much. I think we could spend over an hour on the lessons learned from Phoenix, and I've named a couple of them already. The first is that we're going to approach this by iterations. There's not going to be a big bang approach where we'll set up a system for 400,000 employees. We'll go department by department, and we will adapt as we learn even more lessons ahead. That's the first situation. Situation number two, we've put in place a program called Transparency by Design. And the goal of this program is to put out as much information as possible. Architectural reports, data reports will be made available to the public, and we'll do that quarterly, and documents will be made available online and briefings in the media. And Canada government officials will be informed. And I think this is the first time that we would be sending out information on this. So if there's something that's missing, we want to know. Are you going to take into consideration simple things like the overtime, sick leave, parental leave, things that were not factored in by Phoenix, and that created a living hell out of people's lives? And yes, the response is yes. We went through with Dayforce clients, and we tried to look at people who have different needs and really specific needs, and it's currently working really fine for them. And I believe that it could work well for us. Now, with regard to the implementation and calendar, what does it look like? By the end of the year, we'll have a detailed timeline, and that is one of our objectives for the fiscal year.
Invite PSPC back specifically for a session just on Phoenix and an update. We're going to go to Mr. Genuis for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Reza, you've referred 7 cases of fraud to the RCMP. I'm a bit worried about the cases of fraud not referred to the RCMP as well. How many instances are there in the last 9 years where an official of some level or a third-party reviewer has alleged fraud and the government chose not to refer that issue to the RCMP?
Thank you very much for the question. Of course, that's a hard question to unpack. We can certainly try to triangulate some information. First off, any serious allegation of fraud is referred to the RCMP or to the law enforcement. You've heard that at committee through the AG report, through the Ombudsman, they've themselves said wherever they've seen fraud, they've referred it. I know that when we co-managed a tip line for competition, when we get results or any tips, we are always triaging and looking at. There's a certain threshold for the definition of fraud, but it's always acted upon and follow up depending on.
Okay, so I want to seize on the word serious. You said you refer serious allegations of fraud. Is it common for you to receive allegations of procurement fraud that are ultimately deemed unserious by senior officials?
Certainly all the ones that I've received, I've always referred immediately to a departmental oversight branch to investigate, to review, and then subsequently action. What I meant, and let me clarify my remarks, is that sometimes we receive allegations of frauds that are unfounded. Those do not get referred.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I'm not talking about sort of random unidentified member of the public gives you an anonymous tip saying so-and-so should be investigated. I'm talking about where people inside of government or a third-party investigator that you've hired. Obviously, what brings this to our attention is the case that we heard about at this committee this week, where a third-party auditor engaged by the government met a group of senior officials from multiple departments, alleged fraud, shared evidence for that, suggested a referral to the RCMP. That referral did not happen. Would that have been a case where somebody determined for whatever reason that those weren't serious, or what's your response to that case?
Well, I don't believe so. So in general, and we can turn to Catherine if she has comments specifically on allegations of fraud, the number we've received and what we've referred over the years. I can speak to you a little bit more specifically about that case because, of course, I've been following the deliberations of the committee.
Yeah, can I just ask first, I would like a follow-up on specific numbers of instances where, like how many cases have there been internal allegations of fraud that have not been referred? But I'd like to hear your feedback on this case as well. So if you can get that answer to us in writing, but then also I'd like to hear your follow-up.
Perfect. So I think that what's of relevance to the committee's deliberations, a factor for consideration, is that in the report by the auditor, there is no mention of fraud. So when the report was submitted to departmental officials at that time, Health Canada and others, that was the client, the report was noted non-compliance, was terminated for non-compliance, and was recompeted in a non-Indigenous procurement aspect. So in the auditor's
Right, but just to be fair, I mean, the auditor's role is not to make definitive determinations of criminal activity. It's his role to assess compliance or non-compliance. But he also shared that he thought there was substantial evidence that there was fraud and explained why. And according to his testimony, that information was not acted upon. So, I mean, outside of the scope of the audit, he uncovered information that doesn't seem was acted on. Have you investigated whether the meeting he describes did happen, whether officials were told about fraud? Do you have information as to whether that meeting occurred and what was said and what decisions were made?
Unfortunately, as it relates to the meeting, the material is relatively fresh. The evidence that was submitted to the table or the committee we don't have yet. We're still looking at the chronology of events. I have some familiarity with the case, and I recall that I just arrived in the role of ADM of procurement, and I was testifying at this committee on Indigenous procurement, and it was really around the non-compliance of this joint venture.
Yeah.
So
can I just say as well, though, I mean, at CHCA, they've gotten over $130 million of contracts from the government since 2019. So they were found to be non-compliant. There were concerns that there was fraudulent criminal activity going on. Why did they continue to get contracts over $130 million worth?
thank you for the question.
Just a brief response.
The joint venture was found to be non-compliant. The companies individually were allowed to compete for contracts in subsequent years. They were found non-compliant in the PSAT program, but they were allowed, and both sides, the Indigenous company as well as the non-Indigenous company, were not subject to any sanctions. Now, in a new framework, there may have been a different outcome.
I have to cut you off there because we are past our time. We're going to go to Mr. Jory, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to the officials. Mount Reza, good to have you back with your officials into our committee, and thank you for your wholesome responses. I'm going to direct this question to you, and you're welcome to direct it to any of the members of your team. PSPC is requesting $7.7 million under operating expenditure vote 1B for the quote, the presidency of the 2025 G7 summit in Canada. And this is a horizontal item with about $85 million requested across 4 departments in these estimates. And this is also part of the 2024 budget initiative, which is about $113 million in funding for various departments. Can you shed some light, or any of your team members shed some light around what items are on the agenda for this summit?
Thank you very much for the question. I think PSPC's contribution to some of the back office functions associated with the G7 is actually reflective of how we support many different government horizontal initiatives that come as the time passes. So for specifics around what we're doing with our $7 million, I'm happy to turn the floor to my colleague, Matt Quinlan.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Global Affairs Canada plays a coordinating role in this effort and a leadership role within government. PSPC, with PSPC, we're offering, as the Deputy Minister just mentioned, we are providing support for lease rentals and lease. And for the money that's requested specifically for this year, the money that's mentioned, there's equally really modest amounts for wages, for travel expenses and other expenses, but this is mainly to support, following, of course, the leadership of Global Affairs Canada.
Scope of the work, or what are the requirements, and what projects Canada will be highlighting in that.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. In terms of the substantive content of the G7 agenda, again, there's a G7 Sherpa and Global Affairs, and the Center are looking very carefully in consultation with international committees on what best will be the agenda topics. On our side, we are looking at things, leasing, is there renting, the security, the safety, the various elements of either procurement or leasing that have to be in place to enable a smooth and successful G7 from a bricks and mortar perspective.
For that, PSPC is also requesting authorities for a transfer of about $640,000 from the Treasury Board Secretariat under operating expenditure, again, Vote 1B, to support projects which will reduce greenhouse gas emission in federal government operations. Can you give us some specifics on that transfer, if at the project level, if there exists?
Certainly, I'll start at a high level and turn to Mark for assistance. In fact, PSPC is one of the lead departments in terms of reducing greenhouse emissions through the built environment, through the procurement environment, and looking at various elements such as energy, clean energy, working with, I know Alberta and New Brunswick have been key leaders in this area. So we are looking at the project specifically around that. I think some of the money that is associated with it, it goes to ESAP, which is the energy savings plant that that Parliament is part of. So some of those areas are associated with that. And I don't know, Mark, if you have any further precision.
Je n'ai pas beaucoup à rajouter, sauf.
Well, not really anything much to add, considering that we follow government's direction with regard to the objective to make the government's buildings greener, and these are expenditures for the energy systems here in the National Capital Region, but also across through the procurement of the through procurement in some jurisdictions where the energy sources are less renewable.
Today, I just have one thing for the officials, and I'll get to you, Mr. Genuis. For the officials, I just have a couple of quick questions. If you're able to provide them back in writing. Mr. Page, one of my favorite topics, the Kingfisher. Can you write to the committee and update us on the 295? How many have been delivered? How many certified? Cost overruns? Any holdbacks? And any progress payments made regarding the Kingfishers? I appreciate it. Similar issue on the AOPS. I understand that the last one's been is getting ready for delivery. If you could provide to the committee how much we are over budget on them, how much we've had to spend to address some of the issues, the generator, the water filtration issues, the flooding issue, the anchor issues. And then for Ms. Poulet quickly, regarding the integrity regime, we saw to the CEBA issue, Accenture getting remarkable access to government resources, taxpayers' resources, without any oversight. Accenture has been repeatedly charged by the U.S. Justice Department in the States for false claims against the U.S. government. Please, if you could provide in writing how that affects the integrity regime here, because Accenture, unlike perhaps Deloitte, doesn't have a separate Canada division. It is Accenture, period. So if you could get back to that, or back to the committee with that, I would appreciate it. Mr. Genuis, go ahead, sir, for your point of order.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. On November 19th, when Minister Heidi was here, I asked her about whether there were any Liberal appointed senators or Liberal MPs that had businesses on the Indigenous Business Directory. She didn't have an answer ready at the time, but she committed to providing that information back to us within the usual time frame. She may have hoped that I would forget about it, but I have not forgotten, and the time frame promised has elapsed, and we have not received that information as far as I know. So I wonder if we could receive an update from you or the clerk on what steps are being taken here to ensure that the committee's right to request this information and the minister's undertaking that it would be provided is being respected.
Very valid point. I assume it's not been provided yet?
No.
Right. I'll ask our clerk to follow up with Mr. Haiji's office for that very important information.
Okay, it's probably too late in the term to take too aggressive remedial actions collectively, but I hope, Chair, that you can, with the clerk, really underline that we will expect this information about businesses owned by Liberal MPs and Liberal appointed senators that are on the Indigenous Business Directory. And obviously, if we have to wait another 6 weeks and still don't have them by the time we come back in the new year, then a very aggressive response to the failure to hand over the information will be justified.
The motion that the committee has passed does allow an opportunity for the committee to haul people back to committee to answer for them, not obeying the committee motion of 21 days. I'm assuming that will not be necessary, but we'll ask our clerk to follow up and we'll have a response on Tuesday. Tuesday, we are meeting, thank you for the lead-in, for an hour and 20 minutes with the Public Service Integrity Commissioner. The witnesses that we'd hoped to be here in person for the Indigenous study are not able to commit to being here in person, so we will see them in February. And we'll have the one last round with them to finish up that part of the study. With that, thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.